The Highgate Vampire, a modern-day vampire panic in London. In the late 1960s, London was a city of contrasts, where ancient history met modern life in a chaotic blend of culture and tradition. Amid this bustling metropolis lay Highgate Cemetery, an iconic Victorian burial ground that had fallen into disrepair. The cemetery, with its overgrown foliage and crumbling tombstones, exuded an eerie charm that attracted local youths and paranormal enthusiasts alike. It was here, among the shadows of Highgate's gothic architecture, that one of London's most chilling legends would be born, the Highgate Vampire. The story began in 1969, when reports of a mysterious figure lurking in the cemetery at night began to surface. Witnesses described seeing a tall, dark figure with hypnotic, glowing eyes that seemed to peer into their very souls. Some claimed it was a ghost, while others whispered of something far more sinister, a vampire. The media quickly picked up on these stories, and the legend of the Highgate Vampire began to spread like wildfire. Two figures would come to dominate the narrative: David Farrant and Sean Manchester, both self-proclaimed vampire hunters. Farrant, a member of the British Occult Society, claimed to have seen the entity himself and even conducted nocturnal vigils in the cemetery to capture photographic evidence. Manchester, on the other hand, declared that the creature was a genuine vampire and vowed to exterminate it. The rivalry between these two men added a human element to the legend, fueling public interest and media coverage. On Friday, the 13th of March, 1970, the legend reached its peak. Manchester announced that he would conduct an exorcism at Highgate Cemetery, inviting the public to witness the event. Hundreds of people, armed with makeshift stakes, garlic, and crucifixes, descended upon the cemetery. The police struggled to control the crowd, and the event became a media spectacle. Although no vampire was found that night, the frenzy only served to cement the legend in the public's imagination. Yet, the legend of the Highgate Vampire was more than just a tale of supernatural terror. It was a reflection of the societal anxieties of the time. The 1960s were a period of great change in Britain, marked by cultural upheaval and a questioning of traditional values. The vampire, an age-old symbol of fear and otherness, resonated deeply with a public grappling with the uncertainties of the modern world. Highgate Cemetery, with its decaying grandeur, served as the perfect backdrop for these anxieties to manifest. The reports continued, and the legend grew. People claimed to find dead animals with their throats slit and bodies drained of blood, further fueling the vampire hysteria. It wasn't long before the cemetery became a hotspot for those fascinated by the macabre. Ghost hunters, thrill seekers, and even satanic cults were drawn to Highgate, each adding their own layer to the ever-growing mythos. As the 1970s progressed, the legend of the Highgate Vampire showed no signs of waning. The cemetery's nocturnal visitors increased, driven by both curiosity and fear. Among them were David Farrant and Sean Manchester, whose rivalry had turned into a public spectacle. Each claimed to have the methods and knowledge to defeat the vampire, and their confrontations only added to the eerie atmosphere surrounding Highgate. Farrant conducted numerous vigils and rituals in the cemetery, often documenting his findings and experiences. One of his most famous encounters was with a shadowy figure that seemed to vanish into thin air as he approached. He captured photographs of what he believed were supernatural entities and published them, hoping to provide proof of the vampire's existence. Farrant's dedication to the hunt earned him a loyal following, but also skepticism and criticism from those who doubted his claims. Sean Manchester, on the other hand, took a more dramatic approach. He declared that the Highgate Vampire was an undead aristocrat who had been brought to England in a coffin by followers of black magic. According to Manchester, this vampire had been awakened by the desecration of graves and occult practices in the cemetery. He claimed to have identified the vampire's resting place in a large, sinister tomb within Highgate's confines. In a highly publicized event, Manchester led a group of followers into the cemetery one night to confront the vampire. They descended into the tomb he had identified, finding it cold and filled with an overpowering stench. Inside, they claimed to have discovered a coffin containing a lifelike corpse. Manchester described how they drove a stake through the body's heart, performing an exorcism to banish the evil spirit. This dramatic account was widely reported in the media, though skeptics quickly dismissed it as a hoax or a publicity stunt. Despite these high-profile hunts, the sightings and strange occurrences continued. Visitors reported seeing ghostly apparitions, hearing disembodied voices, and feeling sudden drops in temperature. Some claimed that the vampire could mesmerize its victims, compelling them to do its bidding. These tales only heightened the fear and fascination surrounding Highgate, making it a notorious location for paranormal activity. The cemetery's atmosphere, already steeped in Victorian morbidity, became even more foreboding. The overgrown paths and leaning tombstones seemed to close in on visitors, creating a sense of impending doom. Nighttime explorations were particularly harrowing, with every rustle of leaves and snap of a twig sending shivers down the spine. Those brave enough to venture into the cemetery after dark often reported a feeling of being watched, as if unseen eyes followed their every move. The media played a significant role in perpetuating the legend. Newspapers, television programs, and radio shows all covered the Highgate vampire extensively, each adding their own sensationalist spin. This constant coverage ensured that the story remained in the public consciousness, turning Highgate Cemetery into a symbol of supernatural terror. As the years went by, the fervor surrounding the Highgate vampire gradually subsided, but the legend never truly disappeared. The cemetery remained a site of interest for paranormal investigators, thrill seekers, and tourists fascinated by its macabre history. Farrant and Manchester continued their rivalry for decades, each maintaining their version of the events and the creature they had hunted. Highgate Cemetery itself underwent restoration efforts in the 1980s and 1990s, transforming it from a decaying relic into a historical site open to the public. Despite the improvements, the eerie atmosphere persisted, and stories of ghostly sightings and unexplained phenomena continued to emerge. The legend of the Highgate vampire had become an indelible part of the cemetery's identity, forever entwined with its Victorian tombs and shadowy paths. In retrospect, the Highgate vampire saga can be seen as a convergence of folklore, media sensationalism, and societal anxiety. The figure of the vampire, steeped in centuries of myth and fear, provided a perfect outlet for the public's fascination with the supernatural. The involvement of Farrant and Manchester, with their dramatic hunts and public confrontations, added a human element that captured imaginations and kept the story alive. The events at Highgate also highlight the power of legend and belief. Whether or not a vampire truly stalked the cemetery is almost beside the point. The sightings, the hunts, and the media frenzy all contributed to a narrative that resonated deeply with people's fears and curiosities. Highgate Cemetery became a canvas upon which these fears were projected, creating a story that transcended its origins to become a modern myth. Today, visitors to Highgate Cemetery can take guided tours that explore its history and the famous individuals buried there. The guides often touch on the vampire legend, recounting the dramatic events of the 1970s with a mix of skepticism and intrigue. For many, the cemetery is a place of reflection on mortality and history, but for others, it remains a site of supernatural wonder and fear. As the sun sets and shadows lengthen, one can't help but feel the lingering presence of the Highgate vampire. The rustling leaves, the ancient tombs, and the silence of the night all combine to create an atmosphere of mystery and dread. The legend endures, inviting new generations to ponder the unknown and question what might lurk in the darkness. In the end, the Highgate Vampire is more than just a ghost story. It is a testament to the enduring power of folklore and the human imagination. It reminds us that even in an age of science and reason, there are places where the supernatural feels tantalizingly close, and where the line between reality and myth blurs into shadow. So, the next time you find yourself walking past a dark cemetery, remember the story of the Highgate Vampire, and wonder what might be watching you from the gloom.
Eternal Night. Emily Hartley was a passionate young historian, always delving into ancient texts and forgotten manuscripts. Her fascination with history stemmed from a desire to understand the past and how it shaped the present. One evening, as she sifted through the archives of an old university library, she stumbled upon a peculiar manuscript. Bound in weathered leather and written in an archaic script, it seemed out of place among the more conventional historical documents. The manuscript, titled The Chronicles of the Shadow, immediately piqued her curiosity. It appeared to be a detailed account of significant historical events, but with a sinister twist. The author, whose name was nowhere to be found, wrote of a mysterious figure manipulating events from behind the scenes. Intrigued, Emily began to translate the text, her excitement growing with each passage. As she read, a pattern emerged. Wars, revolutions, and the rise and fall of empires. All had been subtly influenced by this shadowy figure. The manuscript described the manipulator as an ancient being, one who thrived on chaos and darkness. Emily's initial skepticism gave way to a gnawing sense of dread. Could this be the work of a madman? Or was there some truth to these fantastical claims? Determined to uncover more, Emily dedicated herself to the manuscript. Days turned into nights as she pored over the text, cross-referencing it with historical records. To her astonishment, she found corroborative evidence. Subtle details in the manuscript matched obscure facts about pivotal moments in history. The figure described in the manuscript seemed to possess an uncanny knowledge of future events, often appearing just before major disasters or conflicts. Emily's research led her to the name Alaric. The manuscript mentioned this name repeatedly, always in conjunction with the manipulations of the shadowy figure. She delved deeper into historical records, looking for any mention of an Alaric who could fit the description. Her efforts seemed fruitless until she stumbled upon an ancient legend from Eastern Europe, a tale of a vampire named Alaric who was said to have lived for centuries, leaving a trail of darkness in his wake. The legend described Alaric as a powerful vampire who thrived on chaos and death. According to the myth, Alaric had been a warrior prince who was turned into a vampire after a brutal betrayal. Consumed by vengeance and a thirst for power, he had used his newfound abilities to influence the course of history, always staying in the shadows. Emily's heart raced as she connected the dots. Could this vampire be the manipulator described in the manuscript? The implications were staggering. If Alaric were real, he could still be out there, orchestrating events to suit his dark purposes. Her mind reeled with the possibilities. She knew she had to find out more, even if it meant putting herself in danger. Driven by a mix of fear and curiosity, Emily decided to travel to the region where the legend originated. She hoped to find more clues and perhaps even locate Alaric himself. Before leaving, she confided in her mentor, Professor Hawthorne, who shared her passion for history and the supernatural. Professor Hawthorne listened intently to Emily's findings. Though skeptical, he agreed that the manuscript was extraordinary. He cautioned her to be careful, warning that legends often had a grain of truth but could also be deadly traps. He provided her with contacts in the region who might assist her and promised to continue researching from the university. Armed with the manuscript, her notes, and a growing sense of unease, Emily set off for Eastern Europe. Her journey took her through ancient forests and remote villages, places steeped in myth and superstition. Everywhere she went, she asked about Alaric, carefully avoiding drawing too much attention to herself. In one village, she met an old woman named Maria, who seemed to know more than she let on. Maria spoke of a dark figure who had haunted the region for centuries, a creature of the night who fed on the living. She warned Emily that those who sought Alaric often met tragic ends. Despite the warnings, Emily pressed on. She felt she was on the verge of a great discovery, one that could change the course of history. Her search led her to a crumbling castle deep in the Carpathian Mountains, a place whispered about in fearful tones by the locals. According to Maria, this was where Alaric had last been seen. As Emily approached the castle, an eerie feeling settled over her. The air was thick with foreboding, and the silence was oppressive. She steeled herself and crossed the threshold, determined to uncover the truth about Alaric and his dark machinations. Little did she know, her journey was only just beginning, and the shadows of the past were closer than she could have ever imagined. The castle was a monument to a bygone era, its stone walls covered in ivy and moss. As Emily stepped inside, her footsteps echoed through the empty halls. The air was damp and cold, carrying with it a faint metallic scent that made her uneasy. Her flashlight flickered, casting long shadows that seemed to dance along the walls. Emily made her way through the labyrinthine corridors, her senses heightened by the eerie silence. The manuscript clutched in her hand felt heavier with each step, as if it were a tangible link to the darkness she was pursuing. She found herself drawn to a large, ornate door at the end of the hall. With a deep breath, she pushed it open. The room beyond was a grand library, its shelves filled with ancient tomes and scrolls. A large wooden desk stood in the center, covered in dust and cobwebs. Emily's heart raced as she approached the desk, her eyes scanning the titles on the shelves. Many of the books were in languages she couldn't read, but their age and condition suggested they held secrets long forgotten by the world. As she sifted through the papers on the desk, she found a journal written in a flowing, elegant script. It appeared to be the personal account of someone who had lived in the castle centuries ago. The entry spoke of dark rituals and secret gatherings, of a powerful figure who controlled the fate of nations. Emily's hands trembled as she realized she had found Alaric's journal. The journal provided a chilling insight into Alaric's mind. He wrote of his transformation into a vampire, describing the excruciating pain and the insatiable thirst for blood that followed. His bitterness and desire for revenge were palpable in every word. As Emily read on, she saw how Alaric had used his powers to manipulate kings and emperors, orchestrating wars and plagues to suit his whims. One entry caught her attention. It spoke of a ritual that could grant Alaric even greater power, enabling him to plunge the world into eternal darkness. Emily's blood ran cold as she realized the ritual's description matched the events detailed in the manuscript. Alaric's grand plan was to enact this ritual, bringing about an age of unending night. Her mind raced as she pieced together the implications. If Alaric succeeded, the world as she knew it would be plunged into chaos. She had to stop him. But how could she defeat an ancient vampire with centuries of experience and power? Emily's thoughts were interrupted by a soft rustling sound behind her. She turned, her flashlight revealing a figure standing in the doorway. Tall and imposing, with eyes that seemed to pierce through her very soul, Alaric stood before her. His presence was overwhelming, a dark aura that filled the room with an oppressive weight. Emily's breath caught in her throat as she faced the creature of legend. "Ah, the curious historian," Alaric said, his voice smooth and cold. "I wondered when you would find your way here." Emily struggled to find her voice. "Alaric," she managed to say, her voice trembling. "Why are you doing this? Why plunge the world into darkness?" Alaric smiled, a predatory gleam in his eyes. Because darkness is where I thrive, my dear. Chaos and despair are the lifeblood of my existence. The world has grown soft, complacent. It needs a reminder of true fear, true power. Emily felt a surge of anger and determination. "I won't let you succeed," she said, her voice steadier now. "I'll stop you." Alaric laughed, a sound that sent shivers down her spine. "And how do you plan to do that, little historian? You are but a mortal, and I am eternal." Emily's mind raced, searching for a way to turn the situation to her advantage. She remembered the manuscript and the clues it held. There had to be something, some way to stop Alaric. She needed to buy time, to think. "Tell me about the ritual," she said, trying to keep Alaric talking. "What do you need to complete it?" Alaric regarded her with a mixture of amusement and curiosity. "Very well," he said. "I suppose it won't hurt to indulge you. The ritual requires a blood moon, the alignment of certain celestial bodies, and a sacrifice of immense power. The final piece is an artifact hidden within these walls, an amulet that once belonged to an ancient sorcerer." Emily's mind raced. She had to find the amulet before Alaric could complete the ritual. But how? The castle was vast, and she had no idea where to start. As if sensing her thoughts, Alaric's smile widened. "You will never find it in time," he said. "But I do enjoy a good game. Let's see how far your determination takes you." With that, Alaric vanished into the shadows, leaving Emily alone in the library. She knew she had to act quickly. Gathering her courage, she set out to find the amulet and stop Alaric's plan before it was too late. The fate of the world depended on her success, and failure was not an option. Emily's heart pounded as she raced through the castle, guided by the clues Alaric had inadvertently revealed. Each step echoed her determination and fear. She finally found herself in a hidden chamber beneath the castle, where an ancient altar stood, adorned with symbols of dark magic. There, amidst the relics of forgotten sorcery, lay the amulet. Just as her fingers closed around it, Alaric appeared, his eyes burning with fury. But Emily had anticipated this. With a swift, desperate move, she invoked the amulet's power, reciting the words she had deciphered from the manuscript. A blinding light engulfed the chamber, and Alaric's scream of rage and pain reverberated through the walls as the amulet's magic consumed him, breaking the dark spell he had woven over centuries. In the aftermath, the castle crumbled into ruins, and Emily barely escaped with her life. The town, freed from the shadow of Alaric's influence, slowly returned to normalcy, unaware of the true nature of their deliverance. Emily, however, carried the weight of her encounter with her. She returned to her studies with a newfound resolve, knowing the world still held many dark secrets. Her encounter with Alaric was a stark reminder of the thin veil between history and legend, and she vowed to remain ever vigilant, ready to confront the shadows that lingered in the forgotten corners of the past. The amulet, now safely hidden, served as a reminder of the power she had faced and the courage it took to stand against it.